Welcome to The Eternal Quest. I'm Paul Meyer, and this is the second of a two-part series devoted to shamanism. The subject of today's program is Terry Eaton and her book Joy Before Night, in which she recalls with great love and affection the work of her mother, Evelyn Eaton. It was Evelyn Eaton's insights into North American shamanic practices that made her become a medicine woman and the author of several books on the subject. Power centers, pipe ceremonies, ceremonies around the medicine wheel all seemed to Evelyn Eaton to be tools with which to access the spiritual. This was especially true for her during her final years as she battled with the cancer which eventually claimed her life. Join with us as we remember the life and work of this remarkable woman as seen through the eyes of her daughter. Our interviewer for this program is Bill Metzger.
Would you tell us something about your mother, who clearly had a very diverse career as a poet and writer and war correspondent?
Yes, she did, Bill. It's very hard to put into a few words exactly how many things she did do in her lifetime. She was born in Switzerland of Canadian parents and grew up in Canada and in England, and then traveled to the United States where her books were originally being published. And in World War II, she was a war correspondent sent by the American government, and she had her first 4th of July in Chongqing, China. She taught at Columbia University, at Sweetbriar College, mostly creative writing and English. About 1968, she started getting involved in the American Indian and Native American traditions and healing ceremonies in that part of the world, although she herself was a descendant from the Algonquin Nation, which is the Eastern tribe. Mm-hmm. So she felt all her life, she was on a quest of one kind or another, and she felt all her life that she was searching for what it is that made her feel spiritually at home. And she finally found it in the mountains of California, in the Sierra Mountains, among the Paiute and the Shoshone and the Arapaho, which is a whole continent away from the Algonquin Nation, of which she felt a very strong part, but didn't know that she was part of it till much, much later in life.
There's a great deal of interest today in Native American healing and in shamanism.
Yes.
Now, your mother was not a shaman, however.
No.
She was a pipe carrier.
Yes.
Would you tell us what that really means?
Well, she was given a pipe, a sacred pipe, after she had fasted, after she had been to Sweat Lodge, after she had been to ceremonies. It was time that her teachers felt that she was ready to be given the sacred pipe to smoke on behalf of other people and for herself. A pipe really is an instrument of prayer. It's a way of communicating directly to the Great Spirit, and it incorporates everything in one unit. In other words, there's the bowl, which is round, which represents our planet and Mother Earth, and then the stem, which is made of a certain kind of wood, and that represents the vegetable world, the trees. So you have the mineral and the vegetable joined together, and the breath of the person smoking through the pipe. So you have all the elements in the pipe, and it is used directly. It always starts with putting it down to the earth to connect you from the earth up, and then through the divining rod really up to the Great Spirit. So it's almost like the tree of life in a sense.
Yes.
And in all that simplicity, there's a lot of complex, as much as one wants to make of it.
Yes.
You can make it as complex as
tying together all elements of nature and all levels of living.
Yes.
Experience.
Yes. And then, of course, the tobacco are the grains of tobacco that are put into the bowl. As that's fired up, each one of those represents prayer. And so the smoke goes up to the grandfathers and to the Great Spirit. And it was a great honor for her to be given this to use, and she used it faithfully from that time on behalf of what she said, the small and the large miseries.
The Native American view of nature and the world is somewhat different from the modern Western view, isn't it?
Well, yes.
In what way does it differ?
In the American Indian way of looking at things, nature and life are one and the same. The tree is our brother. The fish in the sea, we're all interconnected, we're all related. Nothing is separate, so that we walk together on the same path, even rocks and grass, everything. It's a pantheon way of looking at things, but it made the journey so much more interesting when I finally realized that picking up a rock was doing something that was, how can I say this? It just picking up a sentient thing, that it wasn't just an old thing I could discard as I had in the past, throw away.
This view, recapturing it for yourself, some sense of that, has made some kind of a difference for you in terms of dealing with the modern technological world in which we live.
Yes, in the Western way of looking at things, that we have dominion. Therefore, we've been a bit lax about how we treat the world. Looking at it through Native American eyes, we are responsible. We are guests, and we are responsible for the usage of things. We don't cut down trees wantonly. We ask permission each and every time that we use something. If a tree is to be cut down, in the traditional way of doing things, that tree is prayed for and thanked.
You express your appreciation, your gratitude
Exactly.
for what the tree has done for you.
And when you start doing that, which is what I discovered for myself and what my children began to discover, when you really start doing that, you have a whole different approach
Yes.
to what's around you and your surroundings. When it's one thing to come up to a tree and suddenly see it as something to be thanked for its presence and present of whatever it is that it's going to provide for you, and suddenly it changes your whole perspective. At least it has mine. I'm not always as aware of that as I should be, but I'm much more so than I used to be.
It's one of those things you have to keep sort of bringing your awareness back to center on, don't you?
Yes, and I tell you what helps sometimes, and we've got some of these things here, is thinking of things in a circle. For instance, this is a mandala or wheel that my mother loved to wear. It was beaded. I don't know what tribe this came from, but it's beautifully done. The work is exquisite, and it was a lovely reminder and a very simple reminder of the circle, the medicine wheel, the four directions, and that, of course, the grandfathers, which that represents, the grandfathers being the four directions and Mother Earth and Father Sky,
Yes.
Four directions being east, south, west, and north. So to answer your question about focusing, bringing the focus, makes it easier when you have in front of you a very powerful symbol of what that's all about.
The American Indian tradition really has always had the sense that there was a larger meaning in everything that happened.
Yes,
That
yes.
no event in nature is a random event.
No, it's all put here
Right.
by the grandfathers and the Great Spirit. But on the other hand, I don't feel that they look at things as being larger than life as we sometimes do. Every day is a perfect gift. Every day is something to get up and be thankful for. Every day we show our thanks for the courtesy the grandfathers provide for us. They talk about the courtesy of the grandfathers a great deal, and it's a lovely concept that we are guests. As I've been a guest here, being very courteously treated, and we are all in the guests of the Great Spirit, and therefore we should also learn to say thank you.
There's a special meaning in the title of your book, as I understand it. The title is Joy Before Night.
Joy Before Night. That's from an old superstition about crows, And it goes, one crow sorrow, watch it out of sight, joy before night. And then there's a longer version. One crow sorrow, two crows mirth, three crows a wedding, four crows birth, five crows silver, six crows gold, seven crows a secret never to be told. And I used that as a framework for the book, beginning with sorrow, which was my mother's death, and then going on from sorrow, joy, mirth, birth, and weddings, and it was a very helpful frame to recreate those last 4.5 months of her life.
Could you tell us something, Terry, about the Indian view of animals?
Animals. Well, again, they are our brothers and sisters. They enormous respect. But for beyond that, I think you mean in terms of totems and power animals. And I think again, what I'm more familiar with is the tradition that I've been involved in lately, and that's with the Paiute in the Eastern California. And they have the mountain sheep, big mountain sheep, as a totem. As a matter of fact, you find that in petroglyphs in a number of places. Saracoso Springs is one where the petroglyphs from ancient times depict the mountain sheep, bighorn mountain sheep,
yes.
The tule elk. The animals that are in that part of the world, the mountain lion, the coyote. The coyote, of course, plays the tricks, is the trickster, and trickster comes up in a lot of the tribal traditions. I think it's kind of fun that we all have the trickster in our lives.
Yes.
And of course, then those animals are considered the grandfathers as well. The grandfathers are equivalent to our angels in a Christian, Judaic tradition. It would the angels, the archangels, the cherubs, and the seraphims, and the grandfathers in Native American tradition take on the form of the hawks, the eagle. The eagle is the one that soars above all, and of course, eagle is symbolic almost everywhere we look, in the Bible, in old tradition times, in Egypt. The eagle always seems to have been the symbol of a higher spirit, and it certainly is in American tradition. So grandfather eagle is probably the most exalted and the one nearest to the Great Spirit. And beneath grandfather eagle come grandfather hawk, red-tailed hawk. This is symbolic of that. And what that means is that you see a feather of the red-tailed hawk, and it reminds you to go to your higher self, and that the spirit of the red-tailed hawk, the grandfather, will take your petitions up to a higher source. It's simply calling on all the resources available to help to in our prayers and in our petitions. And that's what it's all about, is helping one another and helping ourselves.
Yes. Yes, ceremonies are very important. Could you tell us about the ceremony called the sundance?
In sundance tradition, which involves dancing toward the pole, the center pole, the men are tied with tongs. I'm sure you've probably seen pictures of this, leather tongs, and they dance themselves almost into a frenzy, day and night, 4 days and 4 nights. They do take time off to rest, but they have no water or food during that time. It's their way of fasting, and it dances into the pole and out, the center pole representing the tree of life, the Great Spirit, and above that would be either a buffalo head or an eagle, either eagle feathers or perhaps an eagle nest, but something representing always even high, the most high, the highest spirit of all, and man's effort to honor and to work for that higher good, which is what the Sundance is all about. I think the equivalent would be, it's a rite of passage, a vision quest, a giving over of oneself entirely, physically, to, again, the higher realm, a taking on of one's manhood, as it were. I've also heard that because women are the bearers of life, and subsequently the pain of that, men took on doing the Sundance to honor that, so that they could be equal in sharing a life pain. And I think that's a beautiful concept, and I hope it's true. If viewers were really interested, I'm sure that they could find much better background on what the Sundance is all about. In fact, Black Elk Speaks is one, I think, very good source. Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions. There are a number of books that beautifully describe it, and much better than I can. I do want to show you something, though, if I can find it. This was made by Edward Heyoka, whom my mother adopted as her Sundance grandson. And he's, as you can see, he is quite a craftsman. He is one of the very few artists in America that was allowed to have little pieces of the moon. And this swan, which was my mother's totem, in a sense, she took on the swan in her later life as symbolizing a lot of things, but she loved the idea of the swan boat and the swan song and going off in the swan world. And the eye is a little piece of the moon. And that just absolutely thrilled her, that she had the earth and the moon and the stars. And then on the back, I don't know if that will show up or not, but on the back is the eagle.
That's
the
beautiful.
hawk. And this was what he gave her. That's another thing I really like to touch on, is the whole concept of giveaway. This was his giveaway in gratitude for her having been his grandmother, sponsoring him for the Sundance. And a giveaway is such a natural part of the tradition of, when you love something and you've become fond of it, that's the time to give it to someone else.
The Native American approach to spiritual healing is something that I thought perhaps you could tell us something about too.
I think what she learned and taught to me was that medicine, as we've come to use it, is in terms of good medicine, and that we each have our own medicine. And through learning what that medicine is, in her case it was writing and communicating and praying and using her pipe and on behalf of other people, and becoming aware of the power, the inner power that you have to help other people, to help yourself first. The tradition is bless yourself first, pray for wisdom, strength, and understanding. And then, armed with that, you can help other people. I'm not sure I can categorize it as being particularly Native American. I think we now have come to a place in our world society, where this is something that can be universally shared, that we are, each of us, imbued with the power to draw on powers to help one another. And I think that's what the New Age has begun to discover. I think scientists are beginning to see that there's more than just the equation, that there is something that we've inherently all had from the time beginning, that we can draw on,
And
which
that is
our
good medicine.
Our good medicine, right.
which is distinctive for each one of us, I take it then.
Yes.
For your mother, it included her writing.
Yes. It's the work that you're committed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring whatever light to that you possibly can. And it does change one's attitude towards work.
Terry, would you show us some of the other items that you brought with you today?
I'd be glad to.
Perhaps the shawl would be.
Oh, this is that's my particular favorite, because I have one like this too. This was done for my mother, but I have one also. And my daughter has one. And the beads are colored in such a way that the elements of earth, air, fire, and water are represented by the colors of the beads, and also the ocean. And then in this particular part of it, this is her own signature, really, Lillian's signature. Lillian's no longer with us, but she took a lot of this ability with her, I'm afraid. Not too many of the younger generation are doing the beadwork these days, and that's sad, because it's just exquisite work. But this would be her own signature of how she perceived the person she was making it for. Mm-hmm. So she put in the colors that she saw representing my mother, and these are little personal messages of hers. Lillian also did beautiful basket work, and I regret that I didn't bring anything to show you of that, though they can be seen in the Independence Museum in Independence, California. And then these were made so that they could just dangle over the ears, and they too have pattern beaded in, representing perhaps the mountains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 4 directions, those would be again the east, south, west, north, Mother Earth, and Father Sky. So it's really 6 directions, but they always talk about the 4 directions.
Yes.
And these are swan feathers, which she was very grateful to have. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I must say that wherever my mother happened to be, and whether she was in a pair of old tattered pants or an old shirt, the accoutrements weren't the important thing. She delighted in ritual if there happened to be an occasion to wear this, or to come out in some sort of regalia. She loved that. But the important thing was to start from where you were. It didn't matter what you had on or what you were doing. The important thing was what was happening in your heart.
Yes. What do you think the Native American attitude about healing can teach us today in our time? Is there some particular thing about it that we need to learn?
Well, yes, I think that what we need to learn and have learned and are learning from recognizing that we don't have the corner on the market for healing, that in our Western society, in a traditional medical approach, that even now in the AMA, we're learning that some of the old traditional herbs and some of the old traditional methods of healing were, after all, and are very authentic methods of healing. A lot of people are turning to sage teas and some of the roots that have been used, and then also in fasting, and those of us who've been allowed and have joined in sweat lodges as purification. It's all part and parcel of how we can keep ourselves healthy and strong. And I think now there's going to be a combination of Western thought and Native American thought combined and not so separate as we've had before.
Are there some things we need to be concerned about in terms of possible trivialization of some of these traditional ideas brought into our modern period?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because as quickly and as rapidly as we've been introduced to the traditions that have been there for centuries, our society sometimes overreaches, and we forget to take things slowly and to approach things in a slower manner. And I don't know, I mean, what I've noticed is that we have been made more aware again of the use of drums, the use of crystals, the use of feathers, if you will, and just, symbolic ways of doing things. And then instead of just accepting that as part of someone's culture and method of doing that, we sort of tend to take it on as our own. And the next thing you know, there are feather shops opening up and crystal shops, which has meant the pillaring of many, many places in order to provide these.
And then along with that comes a fascination with shamanism and everybody wanting to become a shaman.
Yes, how
does one become a shaman?
In one weekend.
Yes, right.
One easy fast food medicine, my mother called that.
Yes.
Yes, and it's too bad, because on one hand, people are hungry, are starved for a thing that makes better sense to them. I know I was, and I was spoiled. I can't sit in judgment of other people who may want to join a seminar and hope that within that weekend or so they can be redirected in their lives. It's not my purpose to judge that at all. It's just to say that it has caused some concern among the traditional people, in that they're very guarded. They want to make sure that we don't misuse their gift, what they give us, and the teachings that they give us. And I think in some cases we may be doing just that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Terry.
Thank you.
It's been a delight having you here.
It's my privilege, really. Thank you.